You know, I'm looking at the sort of McLarens, Ferraris, Aston Martins of this world. The move to autonomy and electric, to an extent, is going to be quite a tricky path for them, because how do you balance autonomy with a driving experience? And that's really what they're selling, is a driving experience.
Of course. Someone once said that they knew of someone who made a tuna sandwich in one of these self-driving vehicles.
Gosh, wow.
Yeah, it was pretty impressive. But do you feel like people are getting more accustomed to the idea of it being safe?
But I think what we're going to start seeing in the future is brands, car makers, other luxury brands, or all brands in general, to be honest, moving more towards like creating their own communities, because in a world of synthesized experiences, AI, the real luxury connection is going to become experience.
Nice to see you, Rory.
Hi, Luke. Good to see you too.
Well, I'd start by kind of opening up that question we talked about before around the whole sort of parity issue.
Yeah.
You know, we were talking, I know, recently about electric vehicles, for example, kind of sounding the same, feeling the same. What's your view on that? And are there any examples that you've got sort of recently where people have really managed to differentiate well?
Yeah. I mean, for 10 years now, we've sort of been talking about electric as a serious proposition. You're right, some brands do it much better than others. I think there's cars that naturally lend themselves to electric powertrains a lot better. And if we're talking about luxury, we're probably talking about the Rolls-Royces, the Bentleys of this world, because they were always marketed on being quiet, comfortable, calm places to be. An electric powertrain that's largely silent, very smooth in its delivery of power, it's perfectly placed for that kind of thing.
It's so interesting you say that, because I was considering that challenge that, those sort of, the V8, combustion engines, moving from that where it's all about sort of visceral feeling and sound to something silent is tricky. But exactly as you say, interestingly, the Rolls-Royce brand, in my mind at least, lends itself this kind of slightly soft, floaty feeling, which is quiet. So do you feel as though brands like that are managing to take that quality through into their interiors and their interfaces, for example, or is it still, there's still a bit of a barrier there? No one doing that successfully?
I don't think any car manufacturer yet has taken the shift to electric to go to something really radical. I think a lot of the time it's still what you'd expect when you get into a car. You've still got the traditional dashboard setup. I mean, the beauty of electric powertrains is that you no longer have such a big unit as a combustion engine, and the electric components are a lot smaller. So car design, both interior and exterior, could have changed drastically. But I think car manufacturers have been careful not to alienate their existing client base by keeping things largely the same. On the interiors, I'm talking Rolls-Royce Spectre here, for example. That's pretty much in line with the rest of the brand in terms of a car. So you're getting in that, it's very similar to a Cullinan or a Phantom. So they haven't reinvented the wheel so much.
No, it's interesting. We've been looking at this sort of from an automotive perspective. It feels to me as though the exterior, the interior materiality. You can start to pull that in line with the brand, but it does feel as though interface-wise, like in certain vehicles, if I was to take the brand away, I would know where I was. From the feeling of it. But when it comes to the interface, it's quite hard to differentiate, or at least it's not being produced in a synonymous way. It's like, it's not a Rolls-Royce interface. And I wondered if you had a perspective on that, and also, is that part and parcel of us becoming, is there a sort of standard now for interface design, which makes it harder to differentiate, from, telephony and...
Yeah, I mean, if we relate this to phones, right? Everyone's sort of become accustomed to an iPhone UX or a Samsung, whatever, or Android. I think in cars, car makers have tried to differentiate. Some better than others. Some car manufacturers have not, and they've actually just given over to CarPlay, for example. So CarPlay Ultra is quite a powerful bit of software. That is obviously the same across the board. I mean, actually, CarPlay Ultra does go that little bit extra and sort of incorporates a bit of the brand into it as well. So like Aston Martin, for example, they've been big on CarPlay Ultra and installing that in their cars.
Yeah.
So that's an experience that's probably like quite the same across the board. Whereas other car manufacturers have gone quite hard down creating their own UX, creating their own identity, which is tricky to do. And the benchmark for everyone is an iPhone, which is so seamless, so like you know where everything is, everything's laid out in the same way.
So they've done it to different levels, I suppose. I mean, I've had experiences of, you know, the screen, as we were talking about earlier, sort of plonked in the middle of the dash, and different levels of positivity, one could say, around that experience. But I suppose, in truth, there's a moment where I suppose the Apple CarPlay thing is interesting because in some ways you're handing over quite a large space to Apple, which is intriguing, and to good or bad. But equally, I can see the drive why some of those companies want to try and develop their own, but of course they've got to do it exquisitely, haven't they? Otherwise it kind of falls over.
I mean, it's if we think about what we do in a car, aside from driving, which a lot of that is becoming automated now as well. So if we think about like a motorway scenario where you're just sat on the M25 and you've got it largely on its autopilot function, your main interaction with the car then becomes that digital element. So you're right. It's a real space where car manufacturers can play to sort of win over clients and make that experience as seamless as possible. I mean, I think we've talked about this in the past, but there's some cars where even the basic functions are buried so deep in the UX, like windscreen wipers and glove boxes. No one needs that.
Yeah, exactly. But, I've had that experience of being in during the summer and in Europe driving a car and it bleeping at me, and then actually just to turn certain things off was actually a struggle in its own right.
The bleeps are a big problem. I think a lot of people have that feedback, but I think half of it is deliberate. They don't want you to turn the safety functions off, obviously, because that's where they get their sort of good safety rating from. But there's some functions that I have a gripe with that are buried so deep in that don't need to be, like volume controls, for example. I think that, call me old-fashioned, but I think that still needs to be a tactile wheel that you can just find without taking your eyes off the road. Because the big thing we're talking about here, and it's linked to safety, is the minute you take your eyes off the road to go down 8 layers in the UX system to find a windscreen wiper.
Those seconds count, don't they?
Yeah. So
that's interesting. And I suppose with the analog piece, there's also an ability to imbue some of the brand and craftsmanship into these little interactions.
Which we see a lot. I mean, brands have very strong views on this, and I've encountered it on occasion. But there are, again, I'm talking like Bentley's always prided itself on having very beautifully milled metalwork, switches and that kind of thing. And I think those qualities are what people that are buying that kind of car want. They, you can't have that same feeling through a screen.
No.
People have tried it with haptics. It's not quite got there. Ferrari, I remember they've actually moved away from this now, but they had like haptic touch buttons on the steering wheel, which were just not particularly good for people to use. The start button on a Ferrari, which is such an emotional point for that car, was a haptic touch button, which never worked.
No.
They're going back to buttons.
That's
now.
interesting.
So they've sort of gone full circle.
No, I suppose it's that classic, isn't it, of reinvent the things which be wise enough to look at the things that can benefit from it, and leave those other things alone.
I don't see the benefit in reinventing a button.
No,
because it's a people know how to use it, they know how to engage with it. I mean, again, I'm sort of highlighting Ferrari here, but they had a sort of touch cross that was a navigation, and it's very, very difficult to use, especially when you're driving along. It's just not a natural sort of thing you're doing.
That age-old, whatever the adage, don't make me think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just naturally go to it. You gravitate immediately towards the button where you've always known.
Yeah, exactly. And do you feel as though, I mean, AI is obviously sort of everywhere at the moment, and we talk about it in the sort of within a creative practice, or generative versus agentic and all this good stuff. But I suppose there's a moment where AI will accelerate people into a kind of relatively good midpoint. But how then do you then differentiate? Especially with things like autonomy.
Yes.
I don't know if you've got any perspective on that.
Well, I think we've had this discussion before, but like there's brands that are going to struggle with that, because the brands that have always marketed themselves on a real visceral experience, where engine sound and feel plays a massive part in the product. You know, I'm looking at the sort of McLarens, Ferraris, Aston Martins of this world. The move to autonomy and electric, to an extent, is going to be quite a tricky path for them, because how do you balance autonomy with a driving experience? And that's really what they're selling, is a driving experience.
Of course.
So I think there are places that they can do it. It's about sort of using autonomy where it's best to use it. So again, I'm talking rainy day on the M25. No one really wants to be controlling an 800 brake horsepower car in that kind of condition. So give that over to the computer, or give that over to autonomous driving ability. But it's how you balance that when it comes to sort of the B-road scenario where you really want to be going and experiencing that product. So
do you feel like, I once heard someone once said that they knew of someone who made a tuna sandwich in one of these self-driving vehicles.
Gosh, wow.
Yeah, it was pretty impressive. But do you feel like people are getting more accustomed to the idea of it being safe, or is that still a hill for people to climb? It feels like it's becoming a bit more natural.
I think, we were talking about autonomy 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It never, I remember going to sort of conferences where they said autonomous cars would be here in 2025, and we're here.
Yes.
2026. They're still not fully, although Waymo is launching on the UK streets this year. But we're still not experiencing it in a mass-produced way, or it's not a volume offering. But I think there still is an education piece for people to know where the boundaries of autonomy are.
Yes.
We're not at the point where cars can completely take control, which is called like hands-off, eyes-off driving, where you're just not looking at the road anymore. We're at that tricky middle ground where cars are, if we take Tesla, for example, they have quite an advanced automated driving system, but it won't allow you to completely let go of the steering wheel. Although it can, in reality, certainly on a motorway setting, do almost everything.
Yeah. I experienced it in the US recently. It was actually quite an incredible experience.
Yeah.
But I think it went back also to, going back to that sort of whole AI piece, how can brands start to leverage more of the sensorial experience in a vehicle to actually really telegraph their brand to you as an occupant?
Well, I guess in a way, if you automate certain tasks, that then frees up the driver, and sort of, we're talking a little bit in the future here where cars are a bit more capable of driving themselves and give us that a little bit more freedom. I guess it gives you more scope to do more things in the cabin, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
if we're talking about like brands selling an experience in the car, then there's probably I don't know what you think on that.
Yeah, I definitely think there's, one always thinks about the driver.
Yeah.
But of course, there's a moment where you all become passengers, and of course that experience can be, shared.
Yeah.
And it can be different per person within that vehicle, which is quite intriguing.
Yeah.
So I think there's lots of opportunity, but I still believe there's a challenge, I think, to really decode what that brand stands for and translate it into something meaningful.
Yeah.
That couldn't be done by anyone else. That's the kind of one of the things we try and think about is like, could this be replicated?
Yeah.
Or is it only, too early a point now?
Well, I think this is just my thoughts, but I think what we're going to start seeing in the future is brands, car makers, other luxury brands, or all brands in general, to be honest, moving more towards like creating their own communities, because in a world of synthesized experiences, AI, the real luxury connection is going to become experience. And I think more people will be looking to a brand to provide those experiences for them. So I see this as quite an important part of how you launch and market a product. But if you were to launch a car now, it's really about what that car, and we're talking cars, can enable you to do.
Absolutely.
What it can facilitate, rather than it's just based on its performance, credentials, or how it looks.
Yeah. And that's intriguing, isn't it? We've been talking a lot. One of our sort of philosophies we're playing with is the idea of, experience is the advantage for a brand, and AI is a multiplier in a way. And in essence, if you don't get that first bit right, you could be multiplying the wrong thing. You can accelerate stuff into the wrong space.
It's a balance, right?
It's a balance.
It's like you've got to nail the digital side of it and give everyone a seamless experience as to what they've become accustomed to through using their phone.
Yeah.
But then you've also got to excite them with something else. So whether that's a unique experience. I mean, some brands do offer sort of an online community where they offer their customers,
Yeah.
exclusive experiences or exclusive access to certain things.
In that top, I suppose, in that sort of more rarefied
Yeah.
luxury space, I can imagine that being
Yeah.
quite. I don't know how does it's I suppose getting that to work at a
Yeah.
a different tier.
Mass
is
market,
quite,
I think, is very difficult.
Very tricky. Yeah.
It's very difficult when you're creating a mass market vehicle to sort of, I guess it makes it more hard to have an identity, really, because
Yeah.
you're trying to sell to a number of different target groups. Whereas if we're talking about the very, very top end of the market,
Yeah.
you're refining it down to a smaller group of people. You're not selling volume, you're selling fewer units, so therefore you can target and be more targeted about
And I
what you
suppose
do.
by virtue of that fact, it's smaller. It's something maybe more attractive.
Yeah,
Or,
yeah. I think all of these companies have marketed themselves on exclusivity in the past, and that's just going to become more and more important. But what does exclusive mean in an age where you can access anything anywhere and know about anything anywhere? It's like exclusivity needs to sort of take a new turn.
Totally right.
I can see people moving, or companies moving towards offering more real experiences.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah,
again,
more visceral.
a more visceral experience, which again balances out with that sort of synthesized experience that you're getting from the digital interaction with the car.
Absolutely.
To enable it to do something like, I don't know, an off-roading day on a car that markets itself as being a particularly good off-roader.
Yeah,
or
something that surprises and delights you in a way that you didn't expect.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
One thing we were talking about earlier was this idea of, in the creative industries, studios like ourselves moving across different disciplines, and I suppose communications is quite interesting because you have the sort of privilege, I suppose, of seeing these brands, how they communicate to you as within your context. What are you noticing in terms of how what's successful and what's not from your side when you're being shown something new or messaging? I
think the most successful brands in terms of when it comes down to communication are the ones that really know what they stand for, what that product stands for, and who it's aimed at.
Right.
I mean, it's basic stuff, but if you're, and I guess it comes down to, again, we're talking about cars that are targeting a very small focus group of people. But if a brand has a really good understanding of what that demographic likes or what that demographic wants to do, then the communication, it shows. They're very confident in the way they position that product. And that enables you to be quite aggressive in the way you position your product as well. I mean, take Aston Martin, for example. They have gone quite hard on the analogue, visceral combustion engine. They're sort of,
excuse the term, but leaning into that.
And why not? Because I guess it's the we're talking about a period that's not going to exist anymore. The combustion engine will sort of cease to exist in favor of electric and alternative powertrains. So their sort of thinking is, let's go all out. Let's be the driver's car. Let's be that real experience. Whereas, and I think that's enabled them to be quite confident in how they place their products. They're, what we're seeing, certainly product-wise, is Aston's current lineup is very good. And they're targeting the drivers. They know who they're speaking to. Where it's not quite so successful is when a car company is maybe transitioning to that first electric model, and they're not 100% confident about who's going to buy it.
No.
We've seen companies sort of dip the toe in the water, like hybridizations.
I was going to ask.
Has been a really good way for people to sort of like test the waters without committing hard on one.
And some of these hybrids are some of the sort of higher end where you've got sort of, the heavy engine with an electric component. It's very, very fascinating.
It's engineering-wise, it makes something incredibly complex and incredibly heavy. But if we look at like the Bentley Continental, which was the first model, the one that was launched in 24, the first model to be a hybrid. That was quite a bold move, because I think Bentley was sort of warming their audience up to electrification. But not quite taking the full step to go. Unlike Porsche, who went full electric and went hard on that. They were sort of warming the ground up to sort of see where that.
That's interesting.
See where that was.
Do you we've sort of been doing work in hospitality and aviation, which we consider to be a part of that. But do you perceive in the luxury tier, as we spoke about, it seems not easier, but some of the barriers are sort of less, there's less barriers to being able to deliver something specific. When you get into this slightly mass realm, are there any examples you've got of where brands are managing to deliver that sense of community, or is it any really successful in your opinion?
My mind immediately goes to someone like Land Rover, who have, again, a very strong brand identity. You think Land Rover, you think conquering all terrain, a car that can sort of get you out of a storm or a tricky situation. I think the reality is that the vast majority of the Land Rover product does not end up doing that kind of thing, but that's just the reality of who's buying these cars. I think, if we then go even further into that and look at like Defender and Discovery, the two brands that are probably aligned to those real experiences of adventure sports, great outdoors. I think a lot of that is to do with the fact as why the Defender has sold so well. It was a difficult car to bring out because everyone loved the old one so much, and the old one was so raw, so mechanical. To bring a new one in its place, and it's actually sold, very well. Yeah,
that's interesting, isn't it? That sort of the space where, in that instance, you're sort of dialing up this, the utility. And it does something very, very well and very targeted.
SUV. We're really focusing on the U, and it's
exactly right. And I suppose that's where I always, we've been considering this a lot, within other spaces where you're dealing with, smaller hatchbacks, or how they start to deal with that level of differentiation. I don't know if there's been many examples you could cite where you've been sort of, you've seen something done very well within that, truly sort of mass space.
I do think if you look at what Renault and Alpine are doing in terms of, mass market brand, Renault previously probably didn't have an awful, it used to have a great edge, and those French brands were always known for their like creativity and quirkiness. And then Renault sort of went through quite a boring phase where it was just creating sort of cars for certain purposes. It seems to have got its edge back, and a lot of that's been going retro. Like they've looked backwards at their back catalogue and Renault 5 and things like that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It seems to have been a hit. I think it's they've executed that quite well.
Yeah, we've been talking in the studio about these brands that have serious heritage. It's an amazing thing to have. Like lots of new brands would kill for that. Because you can dial into it and their stories. I suppose there's also these new entrants where there isn't a lot of legacy. And so they're sort of trying to build something. And I suppose a lot of that is done sort of through, I was looking at some of these brands where, the technology of, suspension systems and is all very, very well executed. But beyond that, beyond the surface, it's, even harder for them to differentiate potentially.
I think you make a great point. I mean, if 2025 was marked by anything, it was the entrance of new car marques that sort of, for a lot of people in Europe and the West, had come out of nowhere because they hadn't really heard about them before. Obviously, we're sort of talking about a lot of domestic players coming from China. But they are coming to the market here with no history at all. I mean, a lot of these companies are sort of, less than 5 years old or less than 10.
Just going back to the whole screen piece. Do you see big changes happening there? Do you see that as being, the blend of analog to digital being considered differently? Because at the moment, it's kind of great in one way, but then in many others, it doesn't work. Is there anything you're seeing or any sort of challenge your spine?
That area, and you tell me with your design head on, but I think that area is ripe for massive change because I feel like we're in the really early days of screens in cars. I feel like we're in the when you used to have a PC monitor that went back about a meter. I feel like we're in those days where a lot of car brands are just gluing an iPad-like structure to the dashboard, and that has all your tech in it, that has all your integration. There's not massive amount of effort going into sort of integrating that into the whole experience, the whole way that the design of the interior is.
And I suppose in essence, the screen is in some ways quite an easy fix. Because you can just manage that, move it, put another one in.
Exactly. When we're talking about how these cars fare in 10, 12 years' time, and we know the speed of how technology moves on, you're going to need to rip out that screen and put a new one in or new software, because so much of a car now is software. It's a real sticking point for when a car gets a little bit older.
Yeah. I think that's why I think for us, I think that the screen is interesting because in some ways it's quite easy to manage.
Yeah.
And everything's contained.
Yeah.
You almost need to work harder.
Yeah.
In terms of design and interaction to really make sure it's doing its job correctly, and where things, as you rightfully said, aren't appropriate for the screen, you take them off and put them elsewhere.
Yeah, which I feel like design teams are getting to understand that a bit better. There was a massive movement towards getting rid of all buttons. You know, there was a point where cars just suddenly had nothing and everything was in the interface. And I guess from a design standpoint, that makes it more minimalist, but it also probably makes it easier to manage functions and functionality. As I said, I think we're moving back to an age where like there's going to be a bit of a balance. Yeah, I feel like balance is sort of summing up a lot.
Totally right. And sometimes it swings one way, doesn't it? And then needs to kind of course correct.
Well, course correction, because people realise that that's actually not what customers want so much. But no, I think we'll see technology moving on and screen technology moving on. I mean, already I talked about the monitor that went back like that. We're now looking at very slim screens. Yeah. But I think we'll get to a point where, I don't know, screens maybe don't even need to be there. It can be projected on or
exactly. More integrated into the actual fabric of the space.
Exactly. That comes at a cost, but in the luxury space, I feel like there's room for that to happen.
And hopefully we'll see brands being brave and really pushing the envelope, but getting the basics right.
Yeah, I think bravery is a really interesting point, and I don't feel like many car manufacturers feel particularly empowered at the moment to be brave, because it's such treacherous waters out there. They're managing the switchover of powertrains, they're managing the rapid development of technology and how that works with the car. So I think if we think about the history of car design and how brave people were in the 60s, 70s, you know,
absolutely.
We maybe we'll have that in a few years when people get a bit more comfortable. But right now, I think it's everyone's sort of working out where the future is heading.
No, exactly.
How they handle that.
How they handle it. Well, thanks very much, Rory.
No problem.
Appreciate. Always a delight to chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to be here. Thank you.
Cheers, man.